Hello everyone, welcome back to Atlanta where we are theCUBE and we are live at the Red Hat Summit. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight. I'm alongside Rob Strechay, where we're going to be talking about the future of work and what Red Hat is doing to make it work better.
I agree, and I think the thing is, I love agentic, I love AI. I kind of look at them as my AI buddy versus agents, because agent sounds very formal.
Totally,
but,
yeah, I get it.
How do your buddies help you do more faster?
How do your pals work with you?
Yes.
Well, to talk more about that, we have Stephen Watt, Vice President, Distinguished Engineer, Office of the CTO at Red Hat.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming back to the show, Stephen.
It's always my favorite thing at Red Hat Summit.
Oh, well, we love having you on. I wanted, so you sit in the Office of the CTO, you're a Distinguished Engineer, which is one of the greatest job titles in the industry. Tell us a little, and you also lead research, so tell us a little bit more about what you do at Red Hat right now.
Yeah, sure. So we define the technology vision for the company, and then we build the prototypes to help make that, bring that to life. And so there's two divisions, there's a research division and emerging technologies. Research is a lot of partnerships with key university research departments. Emerging technologies is teams of software engineers that are just really, really good at rapid prototyping.
So I love it because I look at how this is just evolving so much, and to your point on university partnerships, my son graduates from ASU, comp sci degree on Thursday, so I know how well industry, and not particularly with them, with you guys, but like Boston University, where they have stuff in Boston in that same building. When you look at this and look at how the multi-agentic ecosystem really is going to be playing longer term, these folks are coming up and are AI native and that, and how do you see the future of multi-agent systems and how they're going to help people enable the future of work?
Yeah, so I think what's going on right now is that, technology, in some sense the story's the same, right? We've always used technology to just automate our problems, right? Like automate away the complexity, in life. And so I think that's still true, and I think today we have business processes, and what large language models allow us to do is sort of replace a lot of like the human interaction within those business processes. In some sense, like the human can be like the 2-day holdup in a 10-minute process, and so there's this arc where basically we're rebuilding our business processes using frontier large language models, right? And so this would be like the ChatGPT Codex,
right.
OpenAI Codex, or Claude Opus or something to that effect. And so I think, I can say within my own team, we're doing a process where we're basically changing how we work to basically be driven through Claude. And then there's like a phase 1 of that, and then there's like a phase 2, which is how fast can we get off Claude and go to open weight models. And so I think for any new grad in this space, one being a Claude super user or understanding how to post-train or work with open weight models is sort of table stakes now in comp sci.
You've coined this term that I love, agentic paradox, which is all about how the fastest way to move forward is also the most expensive, the riskiest. Talk me through that tension and what organizations are really dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think, so firstly, this is a hat tip to the original cloud paradox from Andreessen Horowitz, right? So they had this sort of seminal blog which talked about you'd be crazy not to start on the public cloud, but after a while you'd be crazy to stay on it, right? And it's so
convenient, and yet it's also
expensive,
right.
yeah.
Expensive,
yeah.
right? And it was primarily a paradox created around cost. And we're seeing this today with inference, model inference, and token consumption.
Yeah.
And so I'd frame it a little differently, like you'd be crazy today not to start on a frontier model provider like OpenAI or Anthropic, but then after a while when you hit a certain scale, like on token economics, you'd be crazy to stay on that. And that's sort of the dilemma, and when you want to leave, like what are your options, right? And how do you navigate, and there's a process that you'd have to go through. You can look at inference routing or coming on premise to self-managed. We can talk about that. We have a lot of different work in that space, but it's sort of like that journey
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, and some of the research I've seen, it's like 5% of GPUs are actually fully utilized right now, and part of that is people went into GPU hoarding and things like that, and I'm talking about both in the cloud and on-prem, where the fact that I may have signed contracts, and now I'm trying to figure out how to do that, but now people have moved kind of from doing the training, and they've moved into inference, or they're starting to move heavily into inference, which is actually doing the work. And a lot of those workloads tend to be very varied, I guess you could say, and because it's not the same as a cloud native, where kind of Kubernetes kind of came from, a cloud native, how do you see in the research and stuff that you're doing, with the routing and other stuff, how do you get efficiencies? Because our efficiencies were cloud native workloads are very different than AI workloads and how they impact a cluster and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think how you get efficiencies, you want to move to a platform. Now I know that's a bit self-serving coming from Red Hat, but let me just sort of walk you through the journey we're seeing our customers go through, which is today, they're getting these sort of executive mandates on like move to agentic-based development. We want you to use AI as much as possible. And what's happening is every department's doing their own experimentation, so their own pilots, but everybody's going about it a different way. So once those pilots become successful, which is another thing that's around like the utilization, right? Like they're not getting utilized because they don't have like working examples, right? So like Anthropic was something like that, is a really like low cost, fast start way to like, oh, I'm trying to figure this out, what can I do, what can't I do? You get through the pilot process, but everybody will emerge out of the pilot phase and there'll be some like shared observations, like we all like this, what are the lowest common denominators around the inference platform? What models you're using, etc. Once that's done, then central IT can be like, cool, we can use that to figure out what platform we buy and drive total cost of ownership and increase efficiency. And from that's sort of our OpenShift AI story. And then there's like increased efficiency that you can get through LLMD, which is our model inference. I'm sure you've heard of quite a few people talk about that. And so I think that's sort of like the arc. But there are some nuances in that journey, right? And so when you go to the platform, there's going to be this new conversation you have around, okay, we want to use open model weights. How many of those are drop-in replacements for like Anthropic Opus? Some of them will be, others won't. What do you do then? Well, you can look at using an inference router. So an inference router, like your agent, is basically going to be using an endpoint to do the model inference. Can you replace that with a proxy and direct the traffic to other lower cost SaaS models? That's one approach. Or you could redirect it to a open model weight that's being used on vLLM, for instance. And we've got this open source project. It's, I'd say like the number 2 or 3 most popular sub-project in vLLM, called the vLLM Semantic Router. And this is a project that's very popular. We've had, Jensen Huang talk about it on stage, Satya and Nadella talk about it. But it's a project that Red Hat uses to explore token economics and inference routing, and we use that to sort of inform some of our product decisions. So it's not the upstream to our downstream, but it's a way of us understanding the space.
So to that point, just to dig a little bit deep, how does the semantic router in vLLM really help you explore the token economics?
Yeah, so in some sense, like it gives you, the best way I would describe it is, you can get a large model monolith, and it's sort of like getting all of Wikipedia. It knows a little bit about everything. But another way of looking at that is, what if you had a model that was really good at physics, a model that was really good at history, a model that's really good at trivia, a model that's really good at sports, and then the router can sit in between them, and based on the inference requests come in, it can route to the right thing. And so you can basically ensure that the inference requests are always going to the highest performing models. And that is sort of like one of the core premises of open source, which is the ability to build a custom solution. We give you all the ingredients to make the best recipe,
Yeah, and that it's not wasting the time and wasting the energy of the others too, right? No, I see that. So let's talk about agents that are increasingly taking actions, making changes, moving data. That is so exciting and held a lot of promise, but it's also something that's a little unnerving. What keeps you up at night about that, and what are some guardrails that organizations can put in place?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think in the news lately is like OpenClaw and agents deleting databases and running up large
entire
bills.
clouds.
Or entire clouds,
yeah.
So one of the cool things, we actually have an OpenClaw core maintainer in our team, one of the few, Sally O'Malley. And one of the things we're doing is looking at bringing Red Hat strength to that space. So, generally in the industry you talk about it as sandboxing, but you have the agent and you can sort of put it in like this sandbox. So she's got Tank OS, sort of like a lobster tank, and it's just an open source project she's created, but what it does is it uses boot C, which is our immutable operating system, and runs OpenClaw as rootless in Podman. And so basically you're getting a couple of things out of that, like one, because the operating system is immutable, there's limits to what it can actually do with it, it's read-only, and then OpenClaw itself has limited execution permissions on the operating system, and so that's useful there. So those are like key Red Hat strengths. But then the rest of the aspect is, what is it orchestrating, right? And so there's on the egress, so like the network request it's making out to, whether this is tool calling or searching the web or making different API calls, you can create policies around that. So I think that's one of the spaces that is keeping the whole industry up at night, is the promise of autonomous agents. What happens when they go wild, And so, but I think there's quite a lot you can do in this space, and specifically there's quite a lot that Red Hat can bring. We're working also on the OpenShell project with NVIDIA on it as well.
So I was going to say, we were talking about with Gunnar earlier today around the OpenShell, the shell aspect of that, and being able to protect people from themselves and their agents and things like that. When you look at how organizations are approaching this, and I think you kind of brought this up a little bit, it's a lot about the process. Now there's this, it seems like tension between, do I just automate with agents the current process as is, or do I spend the time optimizing the process and then build the agents out? Where does the research fall in that? Is it better to just get started with the process you have and have those subject matter experts document the hell out of it and go, or is it better to spend the time and sit there and go through it?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
No, I'll
mic drop there.
Yeah, no, this is, we're talking about bleeding edge technology, but there's some aspect of us that this is just change management, and just dealing with humans that don't like change. And that's the reason why I said yes. I think one of the things you said, should they just get started? Yeah, I think because moving ships are easiest to steer, and we're seeing two major patterns in this. There's like what I call the co-pilot pattern, and then there's the factory pattern. And the co-pilot is, hey, we've been doing agentic software development the way we've always been doing it. This time I'm just going to use a large language model to increase my velocity, but I'm still changing source code. Then there's the factory pattern, which is way different, which is I don't ever write code, I don't ever edit code. I edit spec files, and I create a rich library of tests. And declaratively in the spec files it says what I want built. The LLM builds it, it passes the test like an assembly line, and something comes out the other end. And if it's what I want, great. If it's not, I don't fix it. I put it in the trash and I go fix the specs and the tests and send it through the assembly line again. Different teams have different reactions to this. It's hard to tell a software engineer like, hey, your value isn't actually in changing the source code, and that's not something we're going to manage. I find it's easier to bring everybody along and they can see the relative pros and cons when they start experimenting, and I think that's what we've seen. We're actually implementing this ourselves. We've got a brand new agentic harness that we're doing for research, which is, first thing I did is I replaced my own contributions in approving ideas and what research prototypes we work on with an agent. And it works alongside them to help them get ideas through. We have a playbook, a set of questions like, why would Red Hat customers care about this? You know, the types of things that are worth asking up front.
Right.
And we're building it, and it's a change management process, I would say. Like, we'll see where we get to at the end of it.
Well, Red Hat is doing it too, along with the organizations it's working with. So, there's been so many announcements here today, and we're having Matt Hicks on the show tomorrow and Ashesh Badani, and they're going to be talking about the new products and services, but you also have insights into what might be coming down the pike and what we might be seeing at the Red Hat Summit 2027 and 2028. Can you share with our viewers the thing you're most excited about right now that we might hear more about in the future?
Yeah, so I'm going to extend, there's two things. Like, one's a short one, and then the other one is a smaller thing, but it's fascinating why it's interesting, okay? So the first one is multimodal AI, right? And so the vLLM Omni project is something that we're working on. Typically, we are using autoregressive models, which just take a token and predict the next token, etc. That's mainly text. vLLM Omni allows us to do audio and image and video, both as inputs and outputs. Pretty exciting to bring that to self-managed models. Again, this is a research prototype, it's an open source project, I can't commit it'll be in product, but we're starting to already use some of that in the frontier model, so a lot of people can relate to that. The second one is way more interesting around sovereign AI. There's so much going on geopolitically around this, so that the concepts of sovereign differ. So if you're in the States, effectively you have all the land that you need to build new power stations, new data centers, can use the latest accelerators. In Europe, that's not true. It takes 7 to 10 years to connect a new data center to the FLAP-D grid. That's a problem if you can't, you need to build new data centers because you need liquid-cooled data centers to run the latest classes of NVIDIA accelerators. So they've got this challenge around core infrastructure. China is, because of sanctions, there's an explosion of new accelerators and open weight models that are coming out over there. And so one of the things we're working on, vLLM CPU, so our product teams will have announced CPU inference support, but this is specifically interesting because it runs in the data centers you have, right? And so I think this is part of a broader trend of like, what can we do, what new accelerators are coming, right? That will work in air-cooled data centers, and specifically Europe is the largest sovereign AI TAM.
Right.
So I think that space and like why we're innovating and how we're trying to back into solving solutions for Europe's sovereign AI is so interesting.
Indeed it is. Well, I can't wait to hear more next year.
Okay.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming on theCUBE. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm Rebecca Knight for Rob Strechay. Stay tuned for more of theCUBE's live coverage of the Red Hat Summit. You're watching theCUBE, the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis.